Hello, hello. Welcome to December, our workshop. And those of you who are new here, welcome. So, for context, here's some of the design principles behind this group. And this is important just to understand as we dive in. We've intentionally designed this community to put us all at risk for good things to happen, right? So the goal is to put myself and you at risk for good things to happen. Part of that was some frustration of being involved with too many communities in my career, not just in our industry, by the way. This is not unique to our industry at all. In fact, I think we might be better than most. But too many communities where I was frustrated, the goal seemed to be to find places to hide, right? Like there were lots of ways to hide. The goal here is to do meaningful work, right? Like the goal here is to make a difference in the world. And we don't really care what the vehicle for that is. It's typically you and your clients, but it's okay if it's other things like writing a book or do, and it's also okay what the size of the impact is. There's no judgment around here about, that's why we don't ask silly questions that you're all familiar with. Questions like AUM or number of clients. There's two real goals of the society. Again, this is all very important context for what we're diving into. So we've already jumped in. Two main goals. The first one is clarity. And the clarity I'm pointing to is that like we're just trying to pull righteous tricks on you with every email and every workshop to help you understand you're the last guru you will ever need. Like you are it, right? Yes, the tactics are important, of course, and we're going to cover them. But you're the last thought leader. You're the last book. You're the last program you will ever need, because I don't know what's going to be important to Melissa. And the insight that's going to occur to Keith is going to be different from the insight that occurs to Anne. And on my Zoom, they're sitting next to each other. And they're going to leave here with two dramatically different insights. So clarity, the second goal is confidence to do it, right? I'm starting to think of this place as a community of confidence, right? Because once you decide to do something like the one thing we're going to talk about today, it gets scary. I don't know if any of you've encountered this before, right? Like we've removed everything, like the tactics, you got them. There's no place left to hide. I know how to do it. I now just need to do it. And that's why we want to be, number two, the community of confidence. The one thing is really about facilitating transformation and then overcoming fear to make the impact that you've always thought about. And what I'd like to do is sort of start by reconnecting to a deeper why. So think about for a minute, where would you like to be 3 years from now? Like if I had time right now to use the Dan Sullivan question on each of you, and I'm going to shut up in a minute and give you, like, maybe we'll even take a full minute, a full minute of quiet. If we were meeting December 12th, 2027, when we meet for the December workshop, December whatever, 12th, 2027, and you're happy with what's happened the last 3 years, the question is why? Like what would have to have happened for that to occur? Let's take a full a full minute. We're going to be quiet for a full minute. Here, minute start. Okay, I got 4 seconds. Take a full minute to think about that, journal, write, whatever. We're meeting 3 years from now. You're happy with what's happened. Why? Wow, that was a minute. So hold that in your mind, right? So then the question becomes, what's one thing? David White's Start Close In poems. He talks about the next step, right? The first step, the one close in, the one you're scared to take. And it really points this idea of like, it's so much more fun to think about the second and third step, right? Like, how will that scale? You know what? You don't have a client yet. We'll worry about scale once you get the first one. Sorry. It just comes up so often. Like, I can't start my firm. I don't know how it will scale. Okay, fine. Let's get a client and then we'll talk about it. So, why is it so scary to talk about the one thing? It's because it's much more fun. It's much easier to hide. It's easier to blame other people. It's easier to not accept responsibility if you think 3, 4, 5 steps out, right? Going 0 to 1 is where things really matter. Let's think about the one thing as a forcing function. I've got a friend, his name's Rob. Rob's one of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life. And at age 46, he'd built a successful tech business. He had sold it. He was living out of his car to build it, showering at 24-hour fitness, built it, had a bunch of success, gave most of the money away because he didn't want to become the kind of person that he thought the money would turn him into. But he really wanted to become the type of person. So like 3 years from now, in his mind, he would have said, if we were having this conversation, I want to be the kind of person who can think deeply about a single problem. Right? So then he said, what would be a forcing function to become that kind of person? Rob's example, he decided to get his PhD at age 46. Not because he cared about becoming a PhD, but because he cared about being the kind of person that could think deeply about a single problem. Right? So if we think about holding the 3 year idea in mind, like who do you want to be? Where do you want to be? How do you want to feel? What's the relationship with the kids look like? What's the relationship with a spouse or partner? How's your health? What does the business look like? Like you've taken some time to get clear about that. Then we back up to the next step. And that next step, I think, becomes what we're talking about today, this one thing. And the one thing, because I love thinking about it as a forcing function. So let's dive in a little bit to let's start with some last year examples from last year. Kaylin, are you around?
Yeah, I'm here.
Tell us a little bit about, because you were here at this workshop last year
I was.
and you spent some time. It wasn't just a cute idea to you. It wasn't a place to hide. You weren't going to sit in some little workshop and pretend while you were checking the scores on ESPN. You were actually there and came up with an idea. So walk us through what happened this last year.
I decided during this workshop last year and not prior to the workshop that it was time to actually finish my book that I was talking about and not finishing. And yeah,
Can we
I
talk
was
about that?
not.
Can we talk about that real
Yeah,
quick?
go ahead.
What do you mean talking about and not finishing?
I mean, I was doing research and interviews and writing and then changing the direction of the book and then also running a business and living my life. And it was, I could tell it was the sort of thing that was probably going to drag out unless I just did it.
Sometimes there's a piece of us that identifies with the person who's going to talk about the book, right? And I think this is particularly true among writing for some reason, is like classic example would be London-based writer who goes to the pub every evening and complains about not finishing the book. That becomes
Yeah.
so much of a part of their identity that it's actually hard to finish. And I'm not pointing to you making the same thing, but I think it's important for us to unravel what parts of not getting something done are serving us in a maladaptive way so that we can finally just say, okay, I'm comfortable with no longer being able to go to the pub and complain about not writing a book. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I think at the time I remember writing that what was keeping me stuck was a belief that people don't really read books. Even though I read books, it just every time I would sit down to write, I would think like, are people actually going to read this? Which is the
Mm.
last thing you should be thinking when you're writing. And then another belief that I needed to make sure this was basically it was perfectionism. I needed to make sure this book was going to be genuinely so useful to people that I was probably holding the bar too high when I did have plenty to put in there that was going to be helpful. But those are the things I said last year during the workshop were keeping me stuck. And I think there is this other thing that I would never have been able to articulate, which was I did have to become a different person to
Mm.
actually finish the book.
Mm.
And
Tell
that process
tell me
is
about
really
that.
painful.
Yeah, tell me about that. What do you mean you had to you had to become the kind of person who finished a book, not the kind of person who was working on a book?
I had to be the kind of person who was who had finessed her view on all of these topics instead of someone who enjoyed marinating in the ideas. So you do have to
Mm.
push yourself into new territory,
Mm.
and that's definitely what it did for me. And it felt a little bit like I had accidentally signed up for a boot camp, but it was lasting months and months. I
So
really
good.
kind of wanted out of it, but I'm really glad that it's done.
So good. Yeah, thank you. Can I just point to something? It's really interesting to me that so if we take the behavior of marinating on a book, that actually, right? Like it's really interesting to me always to remember that that's actually an adaptive behavior. Like that's at a certain point, we talked about it at the beginning of the call. At a certain point, that's what you should be doing. You know what I mean? Like in the process of creating something, you're gonna marinate on it. You're gonna think about it a little while.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to me when a behavior goes from adaptive to maladaptive. And I think the more you can facilitate that transition for that part of you, like I literally think of that as like an identity. We're all made up of a million parts, right? Like there's a part of me that enjoys marinating. And there's a
Yeah.
part of me that thought marinating was really valuable. And in fact, I got rewarded for that. That was in fact, it was adaptive. It was an important part of the process. And I think there's a spot where you can turn to that part of you and say, "Hey, thanks." Right? This was really helpful. And and
Yeah.
I got it from here.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Kaylin. Jack, are you here, Jack O'Connor?
I am.
Can you walk us through what happened to you last year?
Yeah, so my one big thing was pretty broad and just less administrative tasks off my plate to other people on the team to free up my time for more productive things. And I would say I probably
How
I
did you,
accomplished
Jack, how did you come up with that?
that was one of the reasons why I joined the society of just like I had known for months that that was a thing holding me
Mm,
back. It just was obvious in looking at my day to day. And so I would say I'm 40% of the way there as taking a random number, and I've got a lot of the low hanging fruit accomplished. And now it's kind of 2025 can be the next phase. But it's interesting that this has been one of the best years personally, and then for our team. And there has to be some correlation with that. It's hard to say,
mm.
exactly, but there has to be some link with that of having tasks divvied up among the team members who it's most appropriate for.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. Yep.
How did you go from remove yourself from administrative tasks to a specific next step?
In some ways, it's as simple as, the next client situation that came along where there's 6 administrative things to do. It's just like, all right, this is the first situation of like, hey, I can't be doing these 6 things. And once you start, it does get easier. It can be scary at first, like, is this person going to do this correctly? But once you start, it does get easier. And to take it back to the Kits' conversation you had a couple months ago with hiring, like, that's our next phase, because I think I've gotten enough stuff off that like we've kind of reached the ceiling of our current team. And like, I do think there needs to be some sort of new teammate to help out with the next phase of stuff to get off my plate. But with our current, there was a lot that could be done with my current team that I hadn't been utilizing properly until this year.
So you didn't have to hire a consultant or read 17 books to come up with a few ideas?
Correct.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, even though that can be tempting at times, for sure.
No, for sure. Like it's always tempting to think of the third, fourth, fifth step, right? But it turns out like, oh, I have a client meeting in an hour. Here's a thing that I need to get done. I don't like doing this thing. I'm not the most appropriate person. What if I recorded myself doing it and handed it off to somebody and said, hey, next time you're going to do it? Okay. Paul Wheaton, are you around?
Yes, sir.
We got a silly amount of replies to this email, which we love. Like, we're so glad. And I hope you all know, I hope you're all in on the joke that when you reply to emails, you get more value. It's just a weird idea. When you engage, you get more value. So Paul, you replied and told us a little bit about your one thing. So walk us through the process.
Yeah, I think, and this in part came as a continuation of what we talked in the group that was at your house in the fall time, Carl, was I think the next thing for me is to have far fewer clients to work with. So I think I put some arbitrary number down on the email reply of 30 to 50 less or something like that.
Yeah. So that was the one thing, was get rid of clients.
Yes, because I think it's the precursor to everything else. I wrote down on like what I want to be doing in 3 years, and things like work and location freedom, not doing mundane client work, being half as many clients, but doing deeper work with them is all predicated on fewer of them to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I hope it's not lost on all of you, but this is exactly what you do with clients. Like, do I have to keep saying this kind of stuff? Right. Like, and that's why I think that 3-year thing's really important, is the connection to a deeper yes. Right. So what are you going to do next?
I think the easiest next step is just pick one client off my list now who can go somewhere else, because that's an easy first step. It can be accomplished in January, and then just get the ball rolling, and I think take some of the fear away from it. I don't have to transfer the people I really like yet. I can start with the ones that it's, kind of a neutral-ish type relationship. It's either that or spend an afternoon really writing out the ideal client that I want to have, and then by default everything else is not in that list. Maybe that's a better first step.
So there's the process, right? And so now Paul would show up at a 7-1 with himself or a group. Paul would write down, here's the 3-year thing, here's one thing, here's what I'm going to do next this week. This is what I'm going to do. And then he would show a week from now and he would say, did I do it or not? And if he didn't do it, the more exposure you can give yourself to just flat out, no excuse, inauthentic behavior. Like, I didn't do it because I was scared. I didn't do it because I don't know how to write the email. Oh, okay, let's write the email. Like, whatever it is, then you're going to get help from either your friends or yourself or a thinking partner, which, by the way, ChatGPT is really good at this, like really good at this stuff. Hold your own 7-1 group with Chat. Chat will call you on it. So whoever it is, somebody calls you on it and you say, all right, and you try again. And if the inauthentic behavior shows up, guess what? You just keep coming and you just keep trying. And that's where the deep empathy comes from. It's like, hey, you know what? We're all doing the best we can. And if you don't make a single bit of progress in 7 weeks, that's actually okay. It's not ideal, but it's okay if you just keep trying. That's all we care about. Greetings, this is Carl, and what you just watched was a tiny little snippet of our December workshop. And it was actually the 4th annual One Thing workshop. We really dove deep on the idea of how do you get clear, right? You may feel this way. You've got so many things you want to do, so many things you even feel like you should do, so many things you could do to make a massive impact on the world. Sometimes you even know exactly what they are, and sometimes you even know exactly how to do them, right? So there's only one place to hide, which is like we're just a little scared. Well, this month's workshop, our One Thing workshop, to help us zero in on what that thing was and what was standing in the way, what we call blockers. What's the one thing you really want to do that if you did it, it would make everything else seem insignificant? And what's standing in your way? If you know what it is and you know how to do it, why haven't you done it? Well, turns out you're human, like deep empathetic hug. But this workshop was also a punch in the nose, like an empathetic punch in the nose, right? Because your work is too valuable, right? It's too important. Building a profitable, successful business is too important to you and your family, and it's also too important to the community that you serve. So it's time. No more hiding, right? What we've built at the Society of Advice is a community of confidence and clarity. Get clear about your goals, have the confidence to implement them. And so one thing we did in this year's workshop, remember this is the 4th annual One Thing workshop. So we did it last year. In December of 2023, we met for the same workshop. And guess what we did this year? We had some of the people who wrote down their goals last year come talk to us about the experience. In fact, we had one person who finished a book she'd been working on for years and came and talked to us about the blockers, what got in her way, how she solved it, right? So listen, if you're like me, you've probably got a list of things you know, you even feel like you should do them. I'm not saying other people, like we don't like the word should when other people tell us, but I have some things that I know I should do. I know I want to do, right? I know how to do them. What I needed was today's workshop to help me get clear about exactly what it was. What's the next step? What stands in my way? And how can I build a community of confidence around me to get it done? And guess what, my friends? We need you to do the same thing. So whether you join the Society of Advice and watch this workshop or not, please, the work you do is too important. So if you'd like to join the Society of Advice and get access to this workshop, just go to thesocietyofadvice.com. thesocietyofadvice.com. And here's the good news. I've taken all the risk out of it for you. When you join, your first month is free. So join. Look, view this workshop. Please use it. If you decide to use it and then you have to cancel. High fives when we see each other. It's fine. I want you to use this to change the world because we need you. So go to thesocietyofadvice.com now, right? Give yourself a gift. Join your first month. So this workshop is free. That will also allow you to attend the January workshop live, which the January workshop is it's our niche workshop, which I think you're going to love. Cheers, my friends.